Right now, sitting exactly where you are, your body is losing. Not dramatically, you don't feel it. But if the air around you is cooler than about 22 degrees Celsius, 72 Fahrenheit, your body is already burning fuel. It would rather not burn, purely to stop your core temperature from drifting downward. That's you, indoors, wearing clothes, with walls. Now, take the walls away. Take the clothes away. Put that same body outside on an ordinary January night in Poland or Ohio or Manchuria, and you have somewhere between 2 and 6 hours before it can no longer fix the problem by itself. You are not built for this, not even slightly. Because here's the thing nobody mentions about the human body. It's tropical equipment. It's a machine tuned for the African savanna, idling comfortably somewhere around 25 degrees, and in the entire history of our species, it has never been redesigned for anything colder. No fur, no blubber, no hibernation, no ability to drop your heart rate to a whisper and simply sleep through the dark half of the year. And yet your ancestors lived through roughly 2 million winters. In Siberia, in Ice Age France, in places where January air would have killed you before dinner. They did it without a single one of the biological tools that every other cold climate mammal on Earth has. So how? The answer is one of the strangest stories in human evolution. And it ends with an object so small, so boring, so completely unremarkable that there is almost certainly one sitting in a drawer in your house right now. Start with how badly the odds were stacked. Somewhere around 1 million years ago, our ancestors lost their fur. We know roughly when because of genetics. The genes controlling skin pigmentation had to get busy protecting newly bare skin from the sun, and that leaves a datable signature. There were good reasons for it. Losing fur and gaining millions of sweat glands turned us into the best long-distance heat dumpers in the animal kingdom. A hairless ape that sweats can run an antelope into heat stroke and walk up to it afterward. It's a brilliant design for the tropics. And around 100,000 years ago, that design walked north. Now, compare the resumes. A polar bear has hollow insulating hair and a fat layer that can reach 11 centimeters thick. An Arctic fox doesn't even begin to shiver until the air hits -40. A ground squirrel just leaves, dropping its body temperature below freezing and checking out for 8 months. Us, we get goosebumps, which is our body attempting to fluff up fur we no longer have. It's a muscle contraction pulling on a hair follicle to trap a layer of warm air, and it is completely, hilariously useless. Your skin is trying to operate equipment that was removed 1 million years ago. That's our biological cold weather kit, goosebumps and shivering. And the world our ancestors walked into was not a mild one. 21,000 years ago, at the peak of the last ice age, the global average temperature was about 6 degrees Celsius, colder than today. That sounds survivable until you look at Europe specifically, where the estimates for winter temperatures run 15 to 20 degrees below present values. 15 degrees. Take the coldest winter you have personally experienced, the one you still complain about, and drop it another 15 degrees. Now remove central heating, remove supermarkets, and remove the ability to buy a coat. That was the assignment. The first solution was fire, and I want to reframe what fire actually is, because they discovered fire makes it sound like a light switch. Fire is external metabolism. Every warm-blooded animal is essentially a furnace made of meat. You eat fuel, you burn it slowly, you leak the heat. That system has a hard ceiling. You can only eat so much, and only burn so fast. Fire breaks the ceiling. Fire is a furnace you can build outside your body, feed with wood instead of food, and scale up as far as you can gather branches. It's the first time any animal produced heat without paying for it in calories, and it's old, genuinely uncomfortably old. In Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, there's evidence of burning inside the cave around 1 million years ago. At Gesher Benotia Akhav in Israel, roughly 790,000 years ago, we find burned wood and burned seeds and burned flint, and crucially, the burned flint clusters in specific spots rather than scattering randomly, which is what a hearth looks like in the archaeological record. Someone chose where the fire went. By around 300,000 years ago at Kesem Cave, also in Israel, there's a central hearth that was used over and over again. The same spot, for generations. That's not a campfire, that's an address. And fire did more than radiate warmth. It cooked frozen meat back into food. It rendered fat. It dried soaked hides and soaked clothing. Which sounds minor and absolutely is not, because in real cold, wet clothing doesn't make you uncomfortable. It kills you. Fire also bought hours. Winter isn't only cold, it's dark, and a hearth extends the usable day at exactly the time of year when the day is shortest. That's when tools get made, hides get scraped, and children get taught. But fire has one fatal limitation: you can't take it with you. You can carry an ember, you can nurse it in moss, but you cannot walk across a frozen valley wrapped in flames. The moment you step away from the hearth, you're a naked tropical ape again. To actually live in the cold, to hunt in it, travel in it, migrate through it, you needed to carry your warmth on your body. So we come to clothing, and here the story gets weirdly specific, because we can date the invention of clothes using lice. Head lice live in hair. Body lice, clothing lice, live in fabric, so precisely adapted to garments that they essentially could not have existed before garments did. Sequence their DNA, work out when the two lineages split, and you get a date for when humans started wearing things. The answer is roughly 170,000 years ago, which puts clothing about 70,000 years before we pushed into serious cold. We were dressed before we needed to be. But early clothing was not what you're picturing. It was draped. A hide over the shoulders, doubling as a blanket, a baby carrier, a bag. Genuinely useful and thermally fairly poor. A loose skin leaks. Warm air rises out of the neck. Cold air walks in at every gap. For the deep cold, you don't need covering. You need a sealed system, and that required a tool. Around 40,000 years ago in Siberia, eyed needles show up in the archaeological record. Slender slivers of bone and ivory with a hole drilled through one end. 38,000 years ago in the Caucasus. 30,000 in East Asia. 26,000 in Europe. That hole is the entire invention. An awl can punch a hole in leather. Only an eyed needle can pull a thread through it in a controlled, fine, repeatable stitch. And a fine stitch is what separates a hide draped over a body from a garment shaped to a body. Suddenly, you can make sleeves, fitted trousers, hoods, mittens, socks, underwear, seams that don't leak, and you can layer, because this is the part that should genuinely impress you. Ice Age tailors weren't just wrapping up warm, they were engineering. They selected different animals for different jobs. Reindeer hide for the outer shell, Arctic fox for the trim around the face, hair for softness against the skin, and in some cases bird skins, ptarmigan, feathers still attached, as an inner layer because feathers trap air better than almost anything. 3 or 4 layers, each chosen for a specific thermal property tailored to one individual body. That is a modern mountaineering system. Base layer, mid layer, wind shell. Discovered by people with no thermodynamics and no written language, working purely from tens of thousands of years of trial, death, and correction. And we have physical proof it worked. In a cave in Oregon, archaeologists recovered pieces of animal hide stitched together with plant and animal cord, the oldest known sewn clothing on Earth, dated to between roughly 12,700 and 12,000 years ago. Then there's my favorite detail in this entire story. In that same Oregon record, eyed bone needles simply stop appearing after about 11,700 years ago. Nothing was lost. Nobody forgot how. The Ice Age ended, the climate warmed, and tight-fitting tailored clothing stopped being worth the enormous labor it cost. The needles disappear because the winters got easier. The technology tracked the weather. You can read the end of the Ice Age in the absence of a tool. Now here's where I have to correct something, including in myself. Cold isn't what kills you in winter. Cold is the thing you can solve with fire and a good coat. What kills you is that winter is empty, the plants stop, the fruit is gone, the tubers are frozen into the ground, the animals have migrated, gone underground, or gotten extremely thin. And at the same time, your body's fuel requirement has gone up because you're spending calories on heat. Demand rises, supply collapses for months, and you cannot solve that by eating more meat. This is one of the great counterintuitive facts about human nutrition. Northern hunting peoples could not handle much more than about 300 grams of protein per day. Push past it for a week or two, and you get a condition with a wonderfully grim name, rabbit starvation. Diarrhea, headache, crushing fatigue, low blood pressure, and a hunger that nothing satisfies. You can eat lean rabbit until your stomach is full and starve to death doing it, because your liver physically cannot convert protein to energy fast enough. So the actual currency of winter survival was never meat. It was fat, which reorganizes the whole picture of an Ice Age hunt. They were fat prospectors. They targeted the fattest animals in the fattest season. They took the fattest body parts, marrow, brain, back fat, organ fat, the tongue, and they walked away from good lean muscle because good lean muscle wasn't worth carrying. 2/3 to 3/4 of their calories came from fat. The perfected version of this idea is pemmican, rendered fat and dried powdered meat pounded together in roughly equal parts, sometimes with berries. About 80% of its calories are fat. It keeps for months without spoiling and needs no cooking. It is, functionally, an energy bar invented for the end of the world, and they stored it far earlier than you'd guess. At Kesem Cave, 420,000 years ago, there's evidence of bones kept for up to 9 weeks with the marrow sealed inside under skin wrapping, then cracked open and eaten later. 400,000 years ago, somebody looked at a bone and thought, "Not yet. That's not hunger. That's planning." Somebody who is hungry today, holding food, choosing to save it for a version of themselves that doesn't exist yet, deferred gratification, in the fossil record. And when it worked at scale, it worked spectacularly. At one famous hunting ground in eastern France, Ice Age hunters lit fires every autumn and every spring to steer migrating herds of wild horses and reindeer into a narrow valley where they could be killed en masse. Archaeology shows that Operation Running, the same trick, the same valley, the same season, for tens of thousands of years. That's not a hunt, that's an institution. That's knowledge held so carefully that it outlived thousands of generations of the people holding it. And they did not, for the most part, live in caves. The deep cave image is largely a cartoon we inherited from the Victorians. Caves are cold, wet, and often full of things with teeth. What people actually seem to have preferred were rock overhangs, aggressively modified. Big hides draped from the lip to cut the wind, the floor built up, and a fire inside. Take a windy ledge, add a wall and a hearth, and you have a room. But sometimes there was no rock at all. On the open steppe of the East European plain, there's no cave, no overhang, and almost no wood, so they built with what the landscape had, which was mammoth. At a site called Kostenki, on the Don River, about 25,000 years ago, someone constructed a circular structure roughly 12 meters by 10, a ring about 11 meters across, out of nearly 3,000 mammoth bones. Skulls arranged around the base, limb bones as structure, bones from at least 64 individual animals. And it isn't a one-off. Around 70 mammoth bone structures are known across Ukraine and the Central East European plain. Think about what that requires. Not just the muscle to move a mammoth skull, though a large one can weigh over 100 kilos, but the concept. The willingness to look at a treeless frozen plain with nothing useful on it and decide that the building material is the animals. We don't fully know what all of them were for. Some look lived in for months. The big Kostenki ring looks like it was only occupied briefly, which has made some researchers wonder whether it was less a house and more a monument, a shrine of sorts to the animal that made survival possible. Which would mean that some of the oldest architecture on Earth may be a thank you note. Now, to be fair to our biology, it wasn't doing nothing. You have brown fat, brown adipose tissue, packed with mitochondria, and its entire job is to burn calories directly into heat without shivering. And it's responsive, sustained cold recruits more of it, and people with more active brown fat measurably tolerate cold better. Your body does upgrade, just slowly and not very far. You also do a hard, immediate triage. Get cold. And your body clamps the blood vessels in your fingers, toes, ears, and nose, pulling blood back to the core. Your body is not failing to warm your hands. It is deliberately abandoning them to protect your brain and heart. Frostbite is a survival strategy that has been asked to make a decision. Over deep time, populations did reshape. In colder regions, you find more compact bodies, shorter limbs, higher resting metabolic rates. The most committed version of that experiment was the Neanderthals. They went all in on being a cold-adapted body, a wide barrel chest to minimize surface area relative to volume, short stocky limbs, thick bones, heavy musculature, and a huge nasal aperture with long passages, likely to warm and humidify freezing air before it reached the lungs. Textbook Bergman's and Allen's rules. If you were going to design a hominin for an ice age from the body outward, you would design a Neanderthal, and they still needed fire. They still needed hides. 300,000 years of humans, Neanderthals included, used bearskins for exactly this. The most cold-adapted body our lineage ever produced still could not survive winter on biology alone. Nobody wins winter with a body. You win it with a fire, a coat, a full store, and somebody who taught you how. So, step back. Roughly 2 million winters have happened since our lineage first faced a real one. 2 million times, the light got short and the food ran out and the air turned into something that could kill a person, and every single one of those winters was survived. Not by a species, by particular people. Somebody kept a specific fire going through a specific night. Somebody sat in bad light with cold hands and pushed a thread through a hole in a bone needle again and again and again because a child needed a mitten that fit. Somebody looked at a marrow bone while hungry and put it away. Not one of them knew they were part of anything. They were just trying to get to spring. And the knowledge moved. That's the actual miracle here. Not the needle, not the fire, but the fact that none of it had to be reinvented. Every generation received a working solution to winter from people who were already dead and handed it forward slightly improved. The layering system, the fat ratios, the migration timings, the valley where the horses run in autumn. Your species' greatest survival adaptation is not on your body. It never was. It's that we can hand things down, which means the reason you are warm tonight has almost nothing to do with you. You are wearing the accumulated output of 2 million winters of trial and error, most of it paid for by people freezing to death. So the next time the heating comes on and you don't even notice, and you won't, that's the whole point of a thermostat. Take 1 second with this. You are a tropical animal. You have no fur, no blubber, and no winter setting. By every rule of biology, the dark half of the year should still be killing you. It isn't because 40,000 years ago somebody drilled a hole through a splinter of bone. That's it. That's the reason. The most important survival technology in human history was a sewing needle. And it's still in your house.